Gustavo, thank you very, very much, my partner in justice. And thank you for talking about some of the things that we were able to do as a people in our home state of Maryland. Steve Choi, the Executive Director of the New York State Immigration Action. Thank you for the extraordinary work that you do here. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be with you today as I roll out and share with you policy proposals for fixing our very broken immigration system in our country. I also want to recognize New York City leaders like City Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, who have acted in the face of federal inaction on Muni ID. It was very important to me to be here in New York in order to talk about immigration reform. New York is the home of the Statue of Liberty, that enduring symbol of our country. The enduring symbol of our country is not a barbed wire fence, not chain link fence. It is the Statue of Liberty. And New York is the home of Ellis Island. So I wanted to share with you a few thoughts. First and foremost, this one. That every election, especially every national election, is an opportunity for deeper understanding that leads to better actions. And we have that opportunity in the course of this national campaign. So I wanted to be here to speak to the goodness and the compassion that is in the heart of every American. The genius of our country's progress is both a formula and also a belief. The belief is that we're all in this together, that we need each other and we have to help each other if we're going to succeed, if we're going to make our nation stronger, more prosperous, give our children more opportunity rather than less. And the formula, as succinctly as I can sum it up, is that we take actions on things like wages, realizing that our economy is not money, it is people. It is all of our people. And secondly, we make the investments only we can make together as a people to educate our children at higher and better levels in every generation. Secondly, we the people make investments in research, development, discoveries, and infrastructure that make our country stronger so she can give back more to us and to our children and grandchildren. Third, we maintain a balanced and predictable rule of law that protects our common good from excesses and creates a predictable and balanced and level playing field and economy. And finally, one of the other great aspects and parts of our formula for continuing American progress and greatness is that we usually maintain a sensible and rational immigration policy and system so that we can incorporate into this ongoing American journey the best, the brightest, the most highly motivated, and the most talented people from all over the world. This is our formula. And in order to give our kids a better future, we need to return to the things that actually work, that make us the land of opportunity, not only in the tongues of people all around the world, but in reality, here at home. So for many years, in my 15 years, in fact, of elected executive service, I have very intentionally used, and repeatedly, as Gustavo can tell you, very intentionally and repeatedly used the term New Americans. In our country, the greatness is determined not so much by where you came from, but by where you're going, and where we're all going together. During my service as mayor and as governor, I also always kept a sign from the 1890s on my desk that read, "No Irish need apply." And I always kept that sign on my desk, not only as a daily reminder that we were all once strangers in a strange land, but also equally as important, to remind myself every day that we must work together to ensure that we respect, appreciate, and welcome our newest neighbors. America is made better and stronger in every generation by the energies, the talents, and the arrival of new Americans. As governor, I worked with my neighbors to forge a new consensus and battled to forge a new consensus. We became the first state in the nation to defend the state version of the DREAM Act at the ballot box. When we passed that measure in the state legislature, and our Republican brothers and sisters sent it to referendum, we were actually losing. We were behind by about 10 points in that referendum. But leadership isn't about following public opinion. It is about forging a consensus. And that's what we did. And once the people of Maryland understood that the state version of the DREAM Act was about realizing the full potential of every child in our state, it passed with 59% of the vote, forging a new consensus. We also expanded access to driver's licenses so that new American immigrants in our state could obey the rules of the road to and from work. We increased our procurement awards to Latino-owned businesses by 154%. That is a measurable result. And we raised the minimum wage, as Gustavo mentioned, to $10.10 an hour. I believe that as a nation, that one of the most urgent imperatives we have is to rebuild the American dream, to allow people through their own hard work to be able to get ahead. And part of that will require that we pursue and enact comprehensive immigration reform. It is not only important for newly arriving American immigrants in our country today, it's important for all of us. It's important for our entire country. Immigration reform is an urgent national economic imperative, and immigration reform is an urgent national security imperative. Our fight for immigration reform is about bringing more of our neighbors out of the shadow economy and into the full light of an open and inclusive American economy. It's about the work we share to rebuild the American dream. It is about making wages go up again for the majority of Americans, instead of allowing wages to flatline or decline as they have for the majority of Americans over these last 10 years. It's about making our economy work for all of us again. So let me lay out the points of my proposal. I am releasing today a detailed plan for comprehensive immigration reform, which I would begin implementing on my very first day in the White House. Some of the key tenets are these: to provide deferred action to the greatest possible number of new Americans. I would issue an executive order providing immediate relief from deportation with work authorization to all individuals who are covered by the Senate's comprehensive immigration reform proposal. Secondly, I would grant broad waivers to the 3-10-year ban. We needlessly tear families apart when we should be taking actions that keep families together. We punish those who enter the country or overstayed visas, even if they're eligible to legally remain in the United States. I would therefore grant broad waivers to this rather catch-22 and perverse rule that tells people who want to stay here legally and pursue a path to citizenship that for some strange reason they have to leave their family for 3 to 10 years before they can pursue that path. I would expand parole in place to help people obtain lawful permanent resident status without first leaving our country. Third, I would expand access to naturalization for new Americans. Get this, more than 8 million legal permanent residents are eligible to naturalize today, but the process is so very difficult and intimidating that not enough people try. I would expand local outreach and education support to help more legal residents become citizens. Fourth, I would expand access to health care for new Americans. And I will do this by rescinding the short-sighted regulations that prevent many legal residents from getting health insurance. I would immediately restore health care access to upwards of 5.2 million individuals. That's not only good for them and for their families, that's good for us as a country. Fifth, I would end the detention of non-dangerous immigrants and their families. I will close inhumane detention facilities. I would end the practice of mandatory detention, and I would limit detention only to those who pose a clear threat to public safety. Six, I will create an independent agency to set U.S. immigration policy. In other words, an independent body has within the executive branch to make regular recommendations to Congress to regularly adjust immigration levels and eligibility criteria so we never again trap so many millions of new American immigrants in this no-man's land of a hidden and shadow society. Above all, I will use executive action to the fullest extent allowable of my authority as President of the United States to push Congress to pass comprehensive, bipartisan immigration reform, because that is what is best for the people of the United States of America. So let us turn it over now. Some of the discerning members of the New York press, I no doubt, will point out that this is not a round table. This is, in fact, a long rectangular table. And I do want you to hear, in the metaphorical circle of inclusion, which is the genius at the heart of our American dream, that every generation we include more citizens more fully in the economic and social and political life of our country. So I would like you to hear from a few of those individuals right now. We're going to, I want to first ask Servando if he will share his story. And Gabby, are you helping us here?
I'll be helping translate.
Do you need a microphone? Okay. Gabby's going to provide some translating support here for Servando. Third time for discussion, maybe. Look, I want to thank all of you for sharing your stories. And then I think Maria said it so powerfully and so well when she said, "We are good people. We are good people. We are, as Americans, we are good people, and we can do better than this backward, broken immigration process that rips families apart without good reason, that fails to protect public safety as it should, and that is holding us back from building an economy that works for everyone, where we get wages going up instead of down." So, but as I travel around the country, and I'm curious, maybe some of you follow polling on this sort of thing, but I see a huge generational shift on the horizon. I mean, I rarely ever meet young Americans who want to bash immigrant people or blame them for what we have yet to develop the consensus to do for ourselves again as a country. And I'm curious, I don't know if anybody, Steve or Jose, want to speak to that, but what are you seeing in terms of popular support in the United States? Because look, this is about forging a new consensus. Sometimes things don't happen on the first attempt or the second or the third, but if you stay at it, you can forge a new consensus. There were many things we did in Maryland that took us a couple times at that, but we forged that new consensus. What are you seeing out there?
Well, I would just say that I think leadership is absolutely important. I think there's so many places all over New York State. If we have New York City, which is so immigrant friendly, and I think people understand intuitively all that immigrants bring. And I think one of the things that we are seeing is that more and more immigrants are going into places in Long Island, into Westchester, into upstate New York. And there's a real sea change happening there. You know, when someone's, as Pat Young from Long Island likes to say, when someone's pizzeria that they've gone to their whole life, all of a sudden that pizzeria becomes a pupuseria, there's a mental shift that has to take place. And I would say that the leadership is really critical. Are you going to have leaders who stand forward and say, immigrants are new Americans, and they should be welcomed into the fabric of the society that we're trying to build? Or are they going to stand and be demagogues and say there's them and then there's us? And without that kind of leadership, I think that, I do think a lot of the young folks who are there they're not out there to bash immigrants, but if we don't give them the right kind of leadership, if we don't take those steps to establish the kind of atmosphere that we need to, the welcoming, tolerant atmosphere, then I think that you see hate crimes and other things like that occurring. And that's really why I think leadership is so important.
And all of us need to speak out. I mean, when people inject the public discourse with the sort of hate that we've seen over the last week for the sake of our country, we all need to speak. We all need to speak out. Jose, thoughts?
I think Steve is absolutely right. I think as communities get to know immigrants and personalize their stories, they're more likely to be supportive. I think the best example of this is my friend Gabby Pacheco. She's an immigrant rights advocate. About a month and a half ago, she tried to hug and once, that didn't go well. But once Gabby was doing legislative visits, and she ran into a group of anti-immigrant advocates who were also doing visits. And so Gabby started chatting them up and introducing herself and disclosing that she was undocumented. And then by the end of the conversation, they said, well, we don't want to deport undocumented immigrants like you. We want to deport. So as we get to know our community members, I think we're more likely to support them, which means that permanent immigration reform is not a question of if, but when.
Did you have something you wanted to share with us, John?
John Lynn.
John Lynn?
Is there a question?
Questions?
Well, okay, on that note, Governor Malley, I think your principles and your goal of passing immigration reform is admirable. You know, and that we need to do this for me, my parents, all these people here, across the U.S. How can you get this through Congress? How can, because the House is so conservative, so anti-immigrant, everything if you give anything like legal status, they'll say amnesty, the word amnesty. They say no to amnesty. How can you get a bill through Congress?
Look, we have to, part of it is this process we're beginning right now, which is this national campaign. I think when we have a national election for president, it's about more than simply filling a job. It is the opportunity to forge a new consensus. In the past, some of us, even in the Democratic Party, often fell victim to playing constituency politics with immigration reform. And I think that we need to make it a much larger conversation, and we need to make this not about this group of immigrants or this ethnic group, whether it's Irish or whether it's Italian or whether it's Polish or whether it's Koreans or whether it's Latino. It's really about us. U period, S period, the United States of America. This has to be framed, talked about, debated, discussed as a national economic imperative. Look, the biggest anxiety on people's minds right now throughout our country is that we've gone through the first 10-year period where wages have actually flatlined or declined. And that's the first time that's happened since the Second World War. There's a number of actions we need to take in order to get wages to go up again. And one of them is to get 11 million workers out of the underground economy into the full light of an open American society, because we know from our history as a nation that new American immigrants are far more likely to start businesses. They are far more likely to take the reasonable risks that actually create the sort of economic growth that lifts us all. And in order to get wages to go up, it is far better to have people on the books rather than having labor exploited in a shadow economy or in an underground economy. Our parents and grandparents knew that. It's time that we return to our true selves. So you have to be persistent, but you also have to frame the larger question here. What is best for the United States of America? What's best to make our economy work for all of us? What's best for our national security at a time of asymmetrical warfare and when we're on guard about threats here in the homeland? What's best is comprehensive immigration reform. And look, I know you're discouraged. I know a lot of us are discouraged by the state of our national politics, discouraged to the point of being really cynical, and oftentimes in this summer of discontent, really angry about it. But anger and fear never built a great nation. We have to focus on the beliefs and the values that unite us, and we have to never give up, because look, we can all acknowledge one important truth, and that is none of us is going to be here forever. And here's a little bit of more optimism for you. Neither is this current Congress. This Congress is going to change. The demographics of our country is changing. the attitudes of our young people tell me we're moving to a more connected, generous, and compassionate place. So we can either go down this sort of Donald Trump-like detour for 8 years of scapegoating others because of what we've allowed to happen to our economy, or we could go for a sensible rebalancing. Wage policies that work, immigration policies that allow wages to rise rather than fall, and stay at it. And there will be a new congressional district lines drawn in 2020, and there will be a new election just around the corner. So voting is also a disruptive behavior. You know? Voting is a disruptive behavior. We need to disrupt the gridlock by turning out and voting. There is no other way forward for our country other than to use that influence and to use that ballot box to build a new consensus. And the good news is, I think we have a growing constituency of people in the United States of America that are ready to forge that new consensus and follow it and put pressure on their leaders. I think there are many things we did in Maryland. We didn't succeed the first time in repealing the death penalty. Not the second time either. But the third time we did. You don't give up. You keep going. Same was true with marriage equality. Same was true probably with comprehensive gun safety legislation. It took us several times at that. But you don't give up. That's how you forge a new consensus. All right. I'm sorry. We have to do media. Anybody else have other thoughts? Joe, Gustavo, anybody? I don't want to.
Well, very quickly, just wanted to say a couple of things about how important it is for the Latino and immigrant community to vote. It's essential. It's the only way how we are going to pass comprehensive immigration reform as you described. And secondly, learning from the experience in Maryland and the DREAM Act. Remember, you say very clearly, we were losing that. And then we started to educate our community and the voters in Maryland, and the result was extraordinary. So the combination of education and register people to vote and to make sure that people vote is essential to pass comprehensive immigration reform.
Joe?
As someone who's helped organize the African Community Animal, and we've thought about the diversity visa, which benefits countries that have historically been excluded from immigrating to the U.S., particularly the African countries. In the spirit of leading on immigration, I'm wondering if that means passing immigration reform while still keeping the diversity visa system intact.
Well, I would hope that it's my intent in creating the new entity to advise Congress on immigration reform that we would be able to adjust and change the eligibility and the other sorts of things. And I welcome your input into this as well. So look, this is a starting point, but this is democracy is a participatory sport here. So I will stay at the table with your ideas on the diversity aspect of this. I believe our diversity is our strength, and so I would be guided by that principle.
And I just want to follow up on that piece. I want to thank you, Governor, for really putting together this multi-ethnic panel. And I think a lot of times when we talk about immigration reform, we're talking about the future of our country. And the future of our country is becoming much, much more diverse. In fact, the #1 source country for immigrants coming to the United States now is China. It's China, followed by India, and then by Mexico. So as we look forward, I feel that your ability to bring together a lot of diverse folks from the Asian community, from the African community, from the Latino community, it really is, I think, the first step in this larger project to realize that we all need to be working together. And the future of America is going to be multi-ethnic, and we need to be thinking about all these different issues, diversity visas, sibling preferences, and a lot of the issues that a lot of people in these diverse communities care about as we gear for immigration reform. Thank you, Bill.
Hey, Steve, thank you. We're going to do, I think we're going to break here, and we're going to go, am I going to stay here for this, or we're going to walk over?